Well, well, well. The anti-Israel mafia. You guys just can't stop losing. You lose in Hezbollah. You lose in Yemen. You lose in Lebanon. You lose in Syria. You lose in Iraq. You lose in Gaza. And now you're losing in Iran. We're going to talk about the anti-Israel mafia here. That's what I call them. I call them the anti-Israel mafia. So, I've never really quite understood people's fascination with Israel until the last 2 years, when a nation about the size of New Jersey, about 9 million people, surrounded by a bunch of poor, backwards, underdeveloped nations with high illiteracy rates, poverty rates, outdated infrastructure, want to annihilate them. And yet, this little country, flourishes. They have, a exponentially higher standard of living, literacy rates, educational attainment. They contribute to the world in terms of pharmaceuticals and weapons and software and engineering and healthcare, and yet none of these other countries really do anything. To put in, they're shitholes. They're losers. Lebanon is a loser nation. Syria is a loser nation. The Palestinians are losers. They have, in comparison, Iraq, Libya, Tunisia, Yemen, all the countries that hate Israel are losers. And then I look at the people who hate Israel, who say these, just vitriolic things about Israel or about Jews. They try to say that we're not against the Jews, we're just against Zionists. But then, you go on their YouTube or their Facebook channel, their Facebook profile, and you see, the caricature of Jews with the big hook nose and going after money, and these age-old images that we all know what they look like. And you begin to see that these people are misfits. They're angry at their lives for not turning out the way that they wish they would have, and they're just sore losers. They can't stand to see a little tiny country, 7, 8 to 9 million Jews in a, surrounded by a Muslim world that, numbers at about 1.8 billion, and they completely dominate them. Now, it's people like Candace Owens who, pretty much on a daily basis just spew, antiquated, debunked ideas, like the Ashkenazi Jews come from the tribe of Khazaria. I've read The 13th Tribe. It's a book by Arthur Kessler. It's been disproven. The genetic tests don't show, they show hardly any Khazarian blood in them at all. And there's this obsession, trying to basically use the Bible against the Jews, and that they're the synagogue of Satan, and that they took part in the Bolshevik massacre of millions of Christians. She tries to revise the Holocaust. This is somebody that's letting her Catholic convictions, because she belongs to a sect of Catholicism that denounces the Second Vatican Council, which the Second Vatican Council really condemned a lot of the anti-Semitic, libelous claims that the Catholic Church had either propagated or had taken part of in the last couple centuries. So Candace Owens has a true motivation to hate Jews based on her religious conviction. And again, to try to, obfuscate her true intentions, she, labels it anti-Zionist, not having anything to do with Jews. And then she'll have people like Dave Smith, or she'll quote people like, Norman Finkelstein or Jeffrey Sachs or people like that that have similar opinions. But I just I find it funny that just the Jews just keep on winning, and Candace Owens keeps on lying and keeps on trying to like, I saw a recent video of hers condemning what the NBA did to Kyrie Irving back in, I think, 2022, making him go through a list of, demands because he posted a link to some Afrocentric bullshit documentary, Hebrews to Negroes, which I actually bought the book, and it's all bullshit. It's all this, Afrocentric garbage based on nothing. And look, you know what? I don't think that Kyrie Irving should have been disciplined, because I think he should have the freedom of speech to propagate whatever ideas he wants. So, but Candace Owens fails to mention that Donald Sterling, who I believe was the owner of the Los Angeles Clippers, he was forced to sell his NBA team, and he was banned for life for the NBA, and had to pay a $2.5 million fine because he got caught saying racist things about black people. But she doesn't have a problem with that. So see, Candace Owens plays hide the ball. She's not a truth seeker. She's not an intellectual. She's not an investigative reporter. She has a motive, and she has an agenda, and she goes after anything that will conform to the worldview in which she's trying to push, which is that, basically, this is what Candace Owens believes. She believes that the Jews are the synagogue of Satan, that they killed Christ, and that Christians should not support the Jews because they not only denied the Christ, but took an active role in the crucifixion. She believes that the Jews, through AIPAC and other lobbying organizations, have commandeered our politicians, and that it's the Jews' sole responsibility of why we've gone into the war against Iraq and Afghanistan, and probably now with the war that we're pretty much already in Iran. And I understand that, look, geopolitics is very complicated. It's easy to mislead people. And Candace doesn't really strike me as that intelligent of a woman. I mean, I don't think she's dumb, but I don't think she's that bright. She's definitely not the sharpest person I've ever seen. I mean, she's no Sam Harris. She's no, I wouldn't even say she's not even remotely on Jordan Peterson's level. But I personally even think that Dave Smith is even more intelligent than her, even though I disagree with a lot of what Dave Smith says. But I think Dave Smith is quite a bit more intelligent than Candace Owens. Candace Owens is a propagandist. She has a motive. Her motive is her religious conviction. And, I know that a lot of people like her, and they think that she speaks the truth. She's speaking the truth because what she says is so, against the mainstream. And as bullshit as the mainstream is, a lot of these alternatives are just as equally bullshit. So, that's just a few things I've seen from Candace Owens that she tries to do. She just believes that it's hard to even put it into words, because it's like there's so much to unpack here. And I'm going to make a series of videos about this, but in short, Candace Owens has jumped on the anti-Israel bandwagon. She got fired from the Daily Wire. She's pissed off about that. She recently, converted to Catholicism because her $100 million husband belongs to this, denomination that, again, rejects the Second Vatican Council. And that's when all of the anti-Israel and the Jew hatred started to emerge. So, it wasn't that Candace Owens is a truth seeker. Candace Owens, remember guys, Candace Owens is a business owner. And she has a motive to make money. She has a motive to get views. And she knows right now, it's the hot thing right now, is to hate on Israel, is to hate on the Jews. To keep on, propagating, these age-old anti-Semitic conspiracy theories that people just love to eat up. And she takes, her playbook is directly from the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, International Jewry, probably Mein Kampf. I mean, she's a scumbag. She has a unique niche, being that she's an attractive, well-spoken black woman. She has a large degree of protection against criticism. She can use race, and I'm not saying she has or hasn't, but I'm saying she really has a unique niche in that. I can't think of any other, black, well-spoken, conservative women like her who are occupying that space. So she's really, she's carved out a nice niche for herself, and she has a lot to shield herself from criticism. But I'm not going to stop criticizing her. I think she is a disingenuous person. I think that, she draws conclusions from false premises. Another example of that would be when she, has this little clip of Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz, and Ted Cruz saying that, the number one reason he supports Israel is because the Bible commands him to. Now, I do actually agree with Candace Owens on this point. I do think that, I'm not a Christian. I for those of you that, look to Christianity for moral comfort or clarity, may I also suggest the Three Little Pigs, or maybe Humpty Dumpty, because the Bible is about as morally sound as those Aesop fables are. But in any event, I'm not a biblical scholar. I have some knowledge of the Bible being, the Schofield Bible being heavily financed by the World Zionist Congress. Okay, fine. So, even if that's true, Candace Owens, I don't believe that anybody should support any country because of what some religious doctrine says. So, supporting Israel because the Bible says so, even if it did, is a stupid fucking reason. I'll be the first to agree with that. And that's one of very few things I agree with Candace Owens about. But see, the reason why she harps on that is because she's trying to basically say that, this is, the only reasons that Christians support Israel is because of these, fabricated or manipulated verses in the Bible, and therefore, there's no good reason to support Israel, and every reason to support Israel is a lie. So yeah, that's a bad reason to support any country, but it's also really a bad idea to support Iran and what the regime is doing, because you're a Shiite Muslim and you believe that, Imam Mahdi has to come back as soon as the Muslims take over Jerusalem and start handing out Islamic jurisprudence in the city of Jerusalem. That's equally bad fucking reason to support a country. So yeah, that is a bad reason, but there's actually a lot of other reasons that are a lot more legitimate that people have. Maybe not Ted Cruz, but to support Israel. But she paints a prominent figure who has faulty reasoning for supporting Israel as though, look, people that support Israel are, supporting it based on misinterpretations of the Bible and lies, discounting many other reasons that people actually support them. And, again, I'm not pro-Israel. I'm just I'm anti-Iranian regime, and I'm anti, Islamic, theocrats posing as if they're somehow victims when They victimize and oppress their own people. The way that you judge a country is you judge a country by how they treat their own citizens. And I really would love Candace Owens, if you care so much about the Palestinians, if you care so much about Iran, why don't would you want to live there? Because Candace Owens, you could say whatever you want about Israel inside of Israel, and you would be fine. If you said a tenth of what you say about Israel, about Iran, living in Iran, you'd be fucking hung in the gallows. Okay, so again, I'm not saying that Israel is ideal, and I'm not saying that Israel doesn't deserve criticism. I have criticized Israel many times and will continue to. But again, I say the same. I say it over and over again. A civilization does not persist because it is ideal. It persists because it is the least pernicious of all the alternatives. And please, would any of you guys like to live in Saudi Arabia or Iran or Gaza or Jordan or Palestine or Iraq or Libya or Yemen? And I think the answer is undoubtedly no. So, again, like when you have to take a side, you got to take the lesser of two evils here, and there's no fucking doubt. Like if you're having trouble trying to figure out who's worse, Iran or Israel, I think you should look at how Iran treats its own citizens versus how Israel treats its own citizens. All right? And you can clearly see, even in this war, how, Iran has targeted civilian infrastructure, and Israel has targeted military and the regime infrastructure. Even after these three bunker busters hit all three of their nuclear reactors, Israel hit them right in the fucking mouth. They destroyed the IRGC ministry building. They destroyed one of the prisons that they were holding all these political prisoners that they had there. So they are absolutely punching them in the mouth. They're going after the regime. And remember, Iran has 10 times the amount of people that Israel has. So if they're going to commit more, non-combatant casualties, it's only because there's a lot more people there, right? If you actually look at the numbers, it's actually proportionally, they've pretty much killed about the same amount of people. Iran and Israel. It's just that from an infrastructure perspective, Israel's done a far more precise surgical job. All right, so again, this is just to say that I've listened to Candace Owens, and I find it I just find it disingenuous that she's a truth seeker, because she's not a truth seeker. She's somebody who has an agenda, and that agenda is based on a religious bigotry and conviction from her Catholic pagan beliefs that she has, and and they need to be called out for that. And for those of you people who think that she's somehow an arbiter of truth and justice, and that she cares about human rights, there's far worse things than that what Israel's doing to the Palestinians. How about the fact that millions of Chinese Muslims are in re-education camps? How about the fact that the Sudan has killed thousands of Christians? How about all the fucking Christians who were killed in Iraq by Al Qaeda? And how about all the Christians that were killed by Assad? Okay. How about how Iran treats Christians, and how Iranian Christians have been coming out speaking en masse about how horribly they're treated in Iran? But no, you don't say a fucking word about that, Candace Owens, because there's one common thing, and that is that the Jews aren't behind any of that. Because it's okay if Christians die to you, as long as it's not the Jews that have any that you can misconstrue. Here's another fucking thing, Candace Owens. When you try to say, Israel is supporting Armenians dying by supporting Azerbaijan, what you fail to mention, Candace Owens, is that the reason that Israel is supporting Azerbaijan versus Armenia is because they buy a lot of oil from Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan buys a lot of weapons from Israel, and Azerbaijan is one of the few countries in the region that Israel has good relations with, and they both have hostilities towards Iran. So it's more of they're supporting them because they're in an alliance with them, not because they want to kill Christians, you lying bitch. another thing, if you're so fucking concerned with that, why do you fail to mention that Canada supports Azerbaijan, Belgium supports Azerbaijan, and so does Ukraine? They all funded and helped them too. But those are all Christian countries. But out of your lying fucking lips, you omit that, and you omit that because you're a lying piece of shit. You're not a truth seeker. You're a scumbag, and you've officially pissed me off. I am declaring war on you. And I will never stop making videos denouncing you. And I challenge you any fucking time, because I will call you out for exactly what the fuck you are, Candace Owens. You're a scumbag. You are masquerading as somebody who's a truth seeker when you have a clear-cut agenda, and that is to somehow manipulate the political discourse into the narrative that, there's this cabal of Jews that are controlling everything, and that, the main enemy is they're the main oppressor of Christians, and that, we need to basically call the Jews out for their crimes against humanity. But yet it's always fine not to mention the fact that the biggest murderers of Christians to this day are Muslims. In any of these countries that, well, I guess you could say the Chinese as well, but in any of these countries where Christians are being murdered, the murderers are always Muslim. They're not Hindu. They're not Jewish. They're not Taoist. They're not Shinto. They're not atheist. Well, maybe in China they are, but they're Muslim. And you omit that because you have an agenda. And you're a fucking liar, and I know exactly what you are. And I'm calling you the fuck out.